Welcome back, viewers, for our part two of our conversation with Miftah Ismail. This is Shazil Malik from dbtv.live. Is it also not true that this is probably the worst in South Asia as of now?
I know this for a fact that we are growing more slowly than Bangladesh, which is 7%, and India, which is
Right.
7.4%.
So let's say
And
these three economies.
let me add this. And since their population is also growing more slowly than us, then obviously their per capita GDP is also higher than us, much higher than us. I also
Right.
will tell
So
you
now,
that the growth we achieved at 5.79% is the highest in 10 years. I will also tell you that up until the 1980s, since the 1960s, Pakistan grew faster than India every year, and certainly faster than Bangladesh, even after Bangladesh, split from Pakistan.
and then we slowed down.
And then we slowed down from the 19 onwards. India, after the reforms in that Manmohan Singh was, even he was the finance minister, and Narasimha Rao, I think, was the prime minister, and Rajiv Gandhi. These guys set in these reforms, and they were looking at Pakistan for reforms really because we had really liberalized our economy, and
Mm.
then they have been growing very rapidly, and we've not been able to grow. We had a couple of good years in Musharraf's time, and then we really grew slowly. But in the last 5 years of Nawaz Sharif's government in Pakistan, we've grown higher than every year than the previous year, and now at 5.79%, this is the highest growth in 10 years.
Although you do point out that this has been the highest growth in the last 10 years, has it also not been the highest rate at which we have borrowed money from the market?
I don't get the question about highest rate. Uh,
Well, your
borrowing.
growth rate you're saying is the highest that it has been in 10 years. But at the same time, we have borrowed more money than any other government in the last 10 years.
That's true. That is true. Because if you look at nominal numbers, of course, our GDP, for instance, went from 22,000 billion rupees to 34,000 billion rupees. And in that time, our debt, up until last year, our debt was 21 billion rupees. I think 21 trillion rupees. From 14 and a half, we came at 14 and a half. It went to 21 and a half. Last year, it will go to about 24 trillion rupees this year by June.
Right. So growth from 22 to 34, and then our debt goes from 14 to 24 trillion. Now that is, we are borrowing faster and we are borrowing more than we are growing. Is that a matter of concern to you, or do you?
It's a huge matter of, like I said, that once you look at GDP, then you also look at debt, and this is a huge concern for us, and should be. In the first 2-3 years of our government, our growth was about the same as our budget deficit. So basically, your debt to GDP was not going up. When we came to power, our debt to GDP was about 64.5%, and last year it went to 67. I think this year it will go to 70% of GDP. Which is not very high, but the troubling thing is that it's going up. It's the wrong direction, and what you need to do is to actually grow your GDP faster. One of the things we've done in the last 3-4 years is that we've done CPAC, which is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and because of this CPAC investment, a lot of foreign investment has come in, and foreign debt has come in, and because we set up these power plants. Now, we could have waited and we could have done it more slowly, but we really needed to relieve the people of Pakistan from this burden of load shedding.
Even if we take that aside, the important question still comes in that we have this rising debt, but at the same time, our revenues are not growing as they should. So when it comes to the repayment of this debt, will we not be in trouble?
Okay, first of all, I contest. I don't know whether IMF has said this 40% number. I don't think that anybody can give you a number as such, because that whether or not your ability to sustain 40% or 70% depends on the taxes you raise, depending on the exports you have. There's lots of things, and then also depends on what is the nature of the debt. In the sense that look, our external debt to GDP is about 22% going to be, and most of the other debt is local debt to GDP. If I had much of my debt, most of my debt, majority of debt, external debt, I would be more worried. But our external debt is only, like I said, 22% of GDP. So that's the first thing. Second thing that you said that our revenues are not going up, that's actually absolutely not true. That is absolutely counterfactual. In fact, nothing could be more wrong. We have actually increased our revenues more than twice in the last 5 years. When we came into power, People's Party's in last year, the People's Party's government, the total revenue was 1,946 billion rupees. This year, we are going to be about 935 billion rupees, which is more than twice. So our revenue is increasing.
I did not insinuate that revenues are not increasing. I'm saying they're not increasing at the same pace as our debt is. So your official numbers that I Just let me give the official numbers that I got from ADP. Those were 1 point.
I just want to put this on record that our revenues are usually increasing faster than our debt. But now go ahead.
Okay. So the numbers that I have gotten, that our revenues increased by 1.65 and our debt increased by at the rate of 1.9 times. So that is where the differentiation comes. But let's say you disagree with the numbers.
No. Shazil, 1 second. This is not a matter of opinion. This is a matter of fact. Okay, and let me finish this. This is not a matter of opinion. This is not a matter of conjecture. This is a matter of fact. This is a goddamn fact. I mean, it's a clear fact that the revenues were 1,935 billion rupees the year we came. The revenues this year are going to be 3,900 billion. So we will have doubled the revenue of Pakistan, tax revenues of Pakistan, FBR revenue. Then we also have about 1,200 billion rupees of non-tax revenues. So our tax revenues have doubled. There is no discussion about this. There cannot be a disagreement about this. This is a fact.
Total revenue, the total income for Pakistan.
Okay.
Has that doubled?
Actually, that has also doubled. I think that the non-tax revenues were about 600, 700 billion rupees, and they're now about 1,200 billion. So non-tax revenue is not doubled quite, but I mean like 80% growth. But that's a 20% of the total revenues, and the revenues, 80% of the total revenues is tax revenues. Then that's doubled. So yes,
just one thing, just so that we do not alienate people who are watching this. So imagine my mother is watching this, and she wants to know whether. From 2013 to 2018, is she richer or is she poorer? What would you tell her?
Well, our personal income, I don't know. So I don't. I mean, that you can
no. See. as a Pakistani, is she better off than what she was in 2013?
Well, her son is going to Oxford, so she's obviously better off. I mean, you know. but okay. But I'll explain to you.
Right.
In when 2013, Pakistan had a total nameplate capacity of 21,000 megawatts installed power, which means that at ambient temperature at rated power was about 18,000 because a lot of equipment had derated and had deteriorated. So Pakistan could not possibly make more than 15,000 megawatts in any hour, and on average they could only make 12,000 megawatts because much of this hydro power only comes for a few months of a year. In the last 5 years, we've put in more than 10,000 megawatts, which is running, giving power today. And today, rather than the load shedding of 12 hours in cities and 18 hours in villages and in rural areas, today the load shedding is even in the worst of times in Ramadan, with iftar peaks and with hydel power coming in very low compared to 5 years ago. We're still not more than 1 hour of load shedding. So people are obviously better off. When we came to
and
power.
My mother will also disagree with that 1 hour of load shedding. With somebody who was in Lahore 10 days ago, Miftah Sahib, it was at least 4 hours of load shedding.
Where do you live in Lahore? I mean, because I have lots of friends in Lahore. I promise you that no more than 1 hour of load shedding in Kent and many other areas, but I don't know where you live in Lahore. But that said, going back, then we've built a network of highways. When we came to power, the total budget of National Highway Authority was $300 million. Last year, the budget of National Highway Authority was $5.4 billion. So we're building roads and highways, and we're building Pakistan closer together. From Quetta to Gwadar, it used to take 24 hours. Now it takes 8 hours.
Explain to my mom why does PMLN keeps building these highways? How does that help the economy? Or does it? Or is it just one big motorway and it looks fancy and it looks good? Or is there any real economic benefit to that?
Well, actually, first of all, I mean, there's not one big motorway, but Pakistan, of course, much of the Pakistani population lives very close to the Indus River. And if you make a highway close to that, obviously you provide excellent transportation to 80% of the people. A container of goods that goes from Karachi port to, let's say, Lahore used to take 3-4 days. Now it will take, like, 1 day. Although the transport time is only 13-14 hours, but let's say the first stop and all that stuff. That is going to bring the cost of transportation down. That is going to bring the price of goods down. When the exports of China open up and they go through Gwadar, we are going to get a lot of business on our western routes from Kashgar in China to Gwadar in Pakistan, and also through Karachi port. So there's going to be a lot of business that way. The farm to market roads will improve transportation, which means that a lot of perishable goods that go waste in Pakistan. For instance, in Gilgit, 70% of the apricots grown go to waste. Only 30% reach the market. When 100% reach the market, the prices of apricot will go down. And when your mom goes out to buy groceries, she'll find a difference in the price of not just apricot but other things as well. So I mean, I think you cannot really argue against building of communication networks, fiber optics, rail, road. We've done pipelines, 100 billion rupees worth of gas pipelines from south to north. And again, 5 years ago, look at the gas supply in Lahore and look at the gas supply last winter. So there was a marked difference. So obviously people in Pakistan are better off.
Miftah bhai, there's only one concern that I have with what you have said so far. What I remember you as is somebody who has always held a long-term view. In many of your conversations, even when you last came to Oxford, I believe you talked about how there should not be short-term decisions. Like, you have to look at the long-term gains rather than the short-term gains. But yet we talk about how CPEC was important because we needed the industry to function as quickly as possible. We needed these power plants, and we needed to boost the energy sector. Do you think that we dived in too deep?
Okay, I mean, this year when I went to the spring meetings of the fund and the bank in Washington, D.C., one of the topics that they were talking about was third world indebtedness, indebtedness of the less developed countries. And they were especially worried about, I think, China investing in a lot of African countries and a lot of Asian countries, building infrastructure, and then obviously those countries were taking on debt to do this. Now, I remember many years ago, Oxfam reports, I think from the 90s, which showed that the loans going from Western countries to Africa were actually less. New loans from going from Western countries to Africa were less than the repayments Africa was making to Western countries. So now, all of a sudden, these Western institutions becoming very aware of third world indebtedness when China is building projects is somehow, I think, a little disingenuous, on their part, that when they were building infrastructure and they were giving loans, they were perfectly okay. And now that China is replacing some of the European and American power, that they all of a sudden they've now, become disconcerted. So I think there's some politics involved in this, and there's some, I wouldn't say xenophobia, but the fact that since the Western institutions are not as active as China is, well, they're still very active and probably more active than China, but now that China is the new kid on the block of
creeping into
it. So there is some concern because it's a fear of the unknown also.
It'll be very good to see you as a policymaker in the National Assembly, inshallah. Thank you so much, Miftah bhai, for giving us your time. And I hope that we continue to talk. Thank you so much.